Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Auburn Undercover podcast, live tonight here on Tuesday night with Jason Caldwell on the Auburn Undercover YouTube channel. Here, I think we're live on Facebook as well, although I'm not entirely sure. StreamYard is being a little bit buggy with that, so we'll figure that out. However, good opportunity. There has been a lot of news over the last not even 24 hours. I mentioned it when we recorded a podcast last night that I put out a mock class on Monday that I had written on Sunday night. By the time early Monday afternoon rolled around, I regretted one of those picks because things changed that quickly in recruiting. So we're going to talk about that. We already have a lot of questions about that. I've opened up the message boards over at auburnundercover.com to ask us questions and to give us the opportunity to answer those. So we will get to those. Jason, before we get to the questions, which will be very quarterback based, as you would imagine, I've already touched on both of the commitments that Auburn got over the last week or so with Hollis Davidson on July 4th and Jacoby Ward on July 6th. But Jason, just your thoughts real quick on what Hollis Davidson and what Jacoby Ward bring to Auburn's class as they're now back up to 16 commitments.
Yeah. Honestly, Hollis Davidson's a guy that we kind of learned more about, when he was committed and got to see some highlights and go, man, that guy's athletic. I think I learned more about him in the 7-on-7 and watching him play and stretch the field and catch the go ball. I mean, like, he's a legitimate pass catcher at tight end, and he's not small. I think he's going to be, 250, 255. This is more of a Rivaldo Fairweather type guy, I believe. I think Ryan G is going to be more of the Luke Deal type tight end. I think Hollis Davidson is a guy that can stretch the field, do some things. So I like it. I like him being back in the class. And all you have to know is that Auburn kept recruiting him. It wasn't a case of, they went after some highly rated guys, but it was the case of them going, hey, there's still guys out there, but they wanted Hollis Davidson, especially after seeing him in person this summer. So I thought that was a big deal. And so, really like that addition, and I think pairing him up gives Auburn some good building blocks when you think about Micah Riley Ducker there, and obviously you think about Rico Walker transferring in from Maryland. You think about, okay, you got a pretty good tight end room to build around beginning next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then obviously back up to 5 offensive line commitments with Jacoby Ward. He picks Auburn over LSU and Tennessee. Jason, this is a guy that we like quite a bit, and Auburn likes quite a bit as well. Everyone that's already in the chat, y'all keep dropping questions. We'll get to those as soon as we get done with this. But Jason, your thoughts on Jacoby Ward?
Road grader. I think Jacoby Ward's a guy that, had people ask about kind of rankings, and I kind of had to remind people, look, the rankings are done there. First of all, they're not done by me. They're not done by you. They're done by guys, and I don't really like the way they're done, but everybody does them the same way. And they're done in regards to NFL draft. That's how rankings are done. They're not done by how productive guys are going to be in college football. You look at NFL draft, and guards aren't first-round guys. I mean, there's a handful here or there, but it's offensive tackles, it's certain positions. And so you look at quarterback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, defensive line, corner, those are most of the 5-star positions. That's the way this thing's done. And those are mostly highly rated guys. Jacoby Ward's a guy that can play. He's really good. And I think about him, I see a guy that's, a 335, can move people. He's got really good feet. And I think he's going to be a really good addition inside. And you think about what they've gotten some of these pieces in place on this interior offensive line, whether it's Ty Buster or whoever it is. They've got some really good pieces in this 25 class still going after. Obviously, a guy that we'll probably talk about here a little bit later in Andrew Babalola. But, they have put in work on the offensive line. It has been a priority since Hugh Freeze was hired, since Jake Thornton got on board. And it had to be, because it was dreadful. There was not going to be an offensive line to win anything in the Southeastern Conference when those guys arrived. And this adds to another class for them. And they're building a group that can go out and compete with anybody, I believe. And I think Jacoby Ward's one of those guys. And so I like the addition. I mean, straight interior guy, going to be a right guard probably, and a guy that you can lean on, especially in the run game. So I like the two additions, but I really like Jacoby Ward. I think that's a guy that you look at it and people like, hey, look at his offer list, and that's exactly right. His offer list is that of a really highly rated guy, but the position just doesn't work that way in terms of recruiting rankings for most guys.
Yeah, so wanted to touch on those guys first to open the show, give them some love. They deserve it, obviously, after their special moment in committing. Now we're going to hit some questions. We're going to first hit the questions that our Auburn Undercover subscribers asked on the message board. For those of y'all that are here on YouTube Live and on Facebook as well, drop your questions in the chat. If we don't already touch on them with the message board questions, we'll get to them. Jason, I am sure you can imagine what every question has been about.
Most of them.
Yes. So from Walter, interested to hear about the Juju Lewis situation. Appreciate any info on that. But my guess is that it is limited in what you're able to provide here. Then there's more questions about the other quarterbacks, but we will touch strictly on Juju to start. And Jason, what you can kind of say about how things transpired from Sunday night or so, kind of this weekend to Monday afternoon or so.
Yeah, I think it's just been it's an ever going and recruiting is an ever changing thing. And I think it's probably been kind of going since the official visit time and kind of moving along from the Elite 11. I think it's gone everywhere. And I think from an Auburn perspective, he's a guy that they're still looking at. But I think they also look, we need to make sure. And so when you do that, you continue to look at other guys. Auburn, Hugh Freeze has not been a guy that's done this, and we haven't seen it. They've not been a group so far to put all their eggs in one basket. And that hasn't been the case with Juju, even though people might have believed that. They've continued to recruit other guys. And so I think that's the situation here. I don't think it's straight NIL. I don't think that's what this is. I think it's Auburn going, hey, look, let's make sure. And when you look at other guys, you go, okay, maybe there's some things to look at. And so I think that's probably as much as anything, this situation is Auburn going, hey, let's take a second look while we're able to, while there's still guys out there, and see if you can get some guys on campus. And I think that's the next step is, okay, let's deep dive back into some guys that you continue to recruit and looked at. But yeah, I think maybe people thought a month ago, hey, this thing's close. It doesn't feel like it's anywhere close to that now. And I think it may be as much Auburn as it is anything.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that completely. Look, I put out updated big boards earlier on Tuesday. And if I had to rank the three quarterbacks that Auburn's kind of still after right now, and Julian Lewis, KJ Lacey, Deuce Knight, in terms of feasibility, with the way that things have trended over the past 48 hours or so, I would probably go KJ Lacey 1, Deuce Knight 2, and Juju Lewis 3. Now, that's not to say that Auburn's fully out of it with Juju Lewis, but I don't expect that to go positively for Auburn, at least over the next, whenever he makes his decision. But that's just kind of the way that things are trending.
And like I said, I think that's as much Auburn as it is
Yes.
Juju Lewis. I think it's as much about them going, hey, let's take a second look and third look at some of these guys. And so I think that's been the case from the get-go, even though it's felt like it's been, obviously when you get a guy that's been that public for so long, and you got two other guys that are committed as well. I think Auburn has continued to do a good job of recruiting other guys, and we'll see if that impacts things moving forward in the next couple of weeks. We got a couple of weeks to Big Cat Weekend. One of those guys were to show up, then it could absolutely have an impact.
Yeah, someone in the chat says missing out on Juju Lewis is terrible.
No.
I would personally disagree with that sentiment, just in the sense that, this is a very unique recruitment. Think about the situation. Juju Lewis is a 5-star quarterback, committed to USC, committed to Lincoln Riley, who has been considering Auburn, Colorado, Indiana. That's a very interesting collection of schools. And there's a lot of different factors why I do think Auburn is kind of starting to move in another direction. And y'all can probably guess pretty easily some of those. And that's kind of the way things go. going back to the message board questions, who are the quarterback options and how do you rank them in terms of probability to land them? I just answered that.
Yep.
But what are the strengths of those quarterbacks? Jason, I'll let you touch on KJ Lacey, and I'll talk about Deuce Knight a little bit.
Yeah, I think KJ Lacey very, very similar to Juju Lewis. KJ Lacey, when I think about him, I think about Bryce Young. That's what I think about. I think about a guy that's poised in the pocket, can deliver the football, really accurate, athletic enough to run and make plays. And so I think a guy that hey, we've been around KJ and have talked to him, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 times. And I think he's one of those guys that natural gravitate to in terms of leadership. So I love KJ's game. And I think he's a guy that obviously if Auburn gets any one of these three guys, you'll feel pretty good about Auburn's quarterback class in 2025. And so I think KJ is one of those guys that I think he'd be a good fit because of what he does and because of the way he can distribute the football.
I do want to touch on this before I talk about Deuce Knight. The same person who said missing out on Lewis is terrible, Scott. Scott, I'm not arguing with you, but I do want to counterpoint here. He said his skill set fits the offense perfectly, as in Juju Lewis. Look, Juju Lewis has incredible arm talent. We've watched him at different camps, and his arm talent is incredible. He's also he does not run at all. He does not fit an RPO offense. Auburn's offense would change slightly if Juju Lewis came in. I mean, he can run a little bit, but he does not run. He has not run like at all in high school. And that's kind of been made clear to schools for that matter, that he does not want to be a part of an offense where he runs and can risk injury. So I would argue, or I would counter and say that he doesn't necessarily fit Auburn's RPO offense perfectly.
I think any of the three guys you can win with, depending on what you do, but they're going to be different guys because the guy you're going to talk about is a much different guy than these guys in terms of athleticism and the physicality.
Yeah, Deuce Knight. I mean, he's been committed to Notre Dame for coming up on a year now. He committed to Notre Dame last fall. It's been kind of an interesting recruitment with him in Auburn. His older brother is actually Ty Freifogel, the wide receiver who went to Indiana. But with that family being from Mississippi, Hugh Freeze has known them. Hugh Freeze recruited Ty Freifogel when he was at Ole Miss. So Deuce was one of the first guys that Hugh Freeze offered in the 25 class at quarterback. I remember when he got offered, I talked to him at that point. He was unranked.
Yep.
And so he talked about how that connection with Freeze has gone on for a long time, kind of dwindled down a little bit, like kind of in the middle of last year or so. When that contact date came up last year, where Auburn and schools across the country, for that matter, could start talking to 2025 recruits, Deuce said that Hugh Freeze was the first head coach to call him, first head coach to talk to him. Auburn kind of picked up steam there again once that contact date hit, and then kind of fell off again a little bit. They started recruiting some other guys. Deuce started trending towards Notre Dame, and he ends up committing there. But Jason, you mentioned it. He is our colleague Cooper Patagna put it pretty perfectly. He's kind of a freakazoid at quarterback. I mean, he is 6'4.5", 206 pounds, a lefty who runs a 4.5 in the 40-yard. Has a really strong arm, a lot of untapped potential there. He has shown a lot of good, shown some bad as well. But I know from talking to people that were at the Elite 11 camp, look, I think On3 named him their MVP. Of their thing, our guys, Andrew Ivins and Patagna, said that they really, really like Deuce Knight. There's a new rankings coming out on Wednesday. I know Deuce is going to get bumped up a good bit. So this is a guy that's really interesting. I think of all the guys in terms of pure RPO offense, Jason, he probably fits the best in terms of RPO. Now, this is a guy who I would honestly say they're different, but in terms of he's kind of similar to Walker White, that there's a lot of potential, but it needs to be developed a little bit.
Yeah,
I think KJ Lacey and Juju are maybe a little bit more ready to go.
I think throwing the football, pocket presence, understanding offenses, that's where you see those two guys. And go back to KJ a little bit. I mean, his coach Jeff Kelly is a guy, they run a very sophisticated college type offense. So he's had to understand reading defenses and pre-snaps, all those things. So I think physically, you look at him and go, hey, physically, he may not be a guy that looks like an SEC quarterback. But again, you get back to Bryce Young. Bryce Young didn't look that way his entire career, but he's able to make things happen because of understanding what defenses are doing, what the offense can counter, all those things. That's kind of what KJ does. Deuce Knight's the more physical side of things. A guy that, again, might take a little more seasoning, but physically has probably the best tool set of all those guys.
Jason, I think you hit the nail on the head, though. Any of the three quarterbacks, whoever at Auburn ends up with, at this point, we think the most two likely are KJ Lacey or Deuce Knight. Look, I'm not saying any of these guys show up to Big Cat Weekend, but I do think one of them will be there. I don't know who that will be. And I think whoever that is will end up being Auburn's quarterback in the class. Not really a bold prediction, but I'm just saying that on July 9th, I think Auburn will have enough time over the next month or so to keep chipping away at KJ and Deuce and see kind of where things go from there. I do want to take a quick break from the show real quick to plug that over at auburnundercover.com, you can join us for $1 for 1 month as a part of our Media Days sale. You can also get 50% off an annual sub. So that would get you all the way through official visit season next summer. Or if you do the $1 deal, little test drive, get you through Big Cat Weekend here at the end of the month. Should be pretty eventful. While we're still talking quarterbacks, I'll take this YouTube question, then we'll go back to the message board. Has Auburn given up on Husan Longstreet? I do not see that one happening. His brother already transferred to Texas A&M and is on the team there. So that one is, Auburn could theoretically give it another run, but I don't think that.
Yeah, I don't. I think in this day and age, you don't throw away the bathwater with anybody, because you never know what might happen in 6 months, 9 months. But I think, like Christian said, it doesn't feel likely. But I don't think if that's a guy you like, you're going to continue to. We saw it with Alvin Henderson, whoever it is. You're going to continue to keep lines of communication open just in case, because if A&M's season were to go down the drain, big year, who knows? It could change things, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, in 2024 recruiting, you should literally never say never. It does not matter.
Correct, because
what you're talking about.
It may be in the spring of 2026 when that guy comes back around again.
Yeah. Going back to some questions here. We're now at 16 commitments for the 2025 class. This one from Cut on the message board. How many more should we expect? And how do you see those being allocated by position? Good question. Let's see. 1 for quarterback, another 1 for running back. I'll say 2 for wide receiver. So there's 4 more. I think Auburn wants another tight end. I don't think another high school tight end will end up happening. I think that would be the portal, and we're not going to count the portal in this because that will be physically impossible. Offensive line, get another 1 there. That's 5. D-line, I think you get 2 more, 7. Buck linebacker, 2 more, 9. I think you get another linebacker, 10. I think you get another cornerback, Blake Woodby, and I think you get another safety, Anquan Fagans. Now that's 12 more guys, which would put you at 28. You could absolutely sign 28. You also have to keep in mind the attrition that you will probably have with your current commits. That's not predicting anybody. That's just strictly saying the numbers and the way
it's reality. It's the reality of the situation.
Yeah. So, look, I do think 28 is a realistic number. I think I 100% think Auburn will sign more than 25. Now, in my mock class, I think I had them around 26 to 27, but we'll see kind of where things end up once it gets closer to signing day.
Yeah, because the one thing is some of that depends on what the season looks like. If you have some young guys step up and they play really well, then you might go, hey, we can afford to sign a couple of young guys. But if the young guys leave a hole, then you may say we may need to go a little bit more portal for another year to bridge the gap with some of these young guys and develop some. So some of it depends on how guys progress and develop even well into the season.
Exactly. Here is one from AU Tiger BSME. Are there going to be any early enrollees for Auburn in this year's class? Absolutely. Spring practice is a must if they expect to compete well in fall 2025. I do not have exactly a list of the current commits that are early enrollees, but I would expect a good portion of them to be. AU Tigers, I will work to get that list, reach out to some different folks and see if I can get.
Yeah, I would guess at least. You just mentioned 28. I would guess at least half of that would be guys that would be early enrollees, and probably more than that. I
would say like 75%.
Yeah, it's just how, again, that's how things are done nowadays.
Yes. Let's see. AU King, do you believe this is a situation where Auburn will take whoever commits first between KJ Lacey and Deuce Knight, or do you think they hold one in higher regard than the other? That's a good question.
I think you go, hey, first guy in the boat, let's go. I think that's the situation. I don't know that you put any of those guys on hold if they say, hey, I'm ready to come right now. I think it's too hard to know that you're absolutely going to get the next guy. And so I would say that you get to a point where you go, hey, one of these guys, let's go. And again, I lean to you. I think it's one of those, one of those two guys would be the guys they would probably like to lean on right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's July 9th. It's not March. You don't have time to mess around at quarterback anymore. I would say if there's a timeline, I would say that Auburn would recruit both of those guys to Big Cat. I really don't know who they hold in higher regard. That's a question I don't have an answer to. In terms of rankings, I mean, Deuce Knight is ranked higher. I would think that maybe he's held in a little bit higher regard, but they've kept in contact with KJ Lacey more throughout the process. So that could tell you something as well. Look, I think it'll be whoever you can get by Big Cat Weekend, whoever you have the most traction with there. That's who they'll make the move with. And we'll kind of wait and see. Look, we're in the infancy stages a little bit of Auburn pivoting somewhat at quarterback. Jason, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is a little bit different. Question from Jaws. Talk a little bit about KJ Lacey. Is he the type to turn a few recruits' heads? Is he a day one potential starter, or is he a redshirt type guy?
Yeah, I don't know. Those are things you don't really know. Physically, he's not a guy that you would think would be a day one starter. I think mentally and fundamentally, I think he's a guy that could come in and compete right away. And so, it depends on kind of what you're doing. He's a guy that does some RPO stuff. Now, he's not a guy that's going to run at the ton, but again, I come back to a guy like Bryce Young. You have to run enough and basically run enough to get to where your throwing lanes are. And that's what KJ Lacey does a good job of. So I would say probably not, but I think he has the skill set to come in.
He's a guy who can compete next year.
Yeah, correct. And so, again, who knows, because that's the one that there's a couple of positions where you go, it doesn't matter skill set, doesn't matter physicality, all those things. All that matters is how you comprehend, how quickly you can process, do all those things. I think he's a guy that can do those things. That's the key to playing quarterback early nowadays.
Here's one from Bo that I'll hit real quick. How fast can we get KJ to jump on board if that's the choice? We need to open up the Saraland pipeline. Definitely want to get in with Saraland a little more. In terms of getting him to jump on board, I think of between him and Deuce Knight, you have a better chance to get KJ Lacey in the class quicker based on how long you've been recruiting him and the traction that you have there. How fast, I don't know that exactly, but I do think you could have an answer. I think you will have an answer at quarterback by the end of this month or by the middle of August. That would be-
and obviously there, you have Antonio Coleman, and there was a question, on YouTube about defensive line, and that's one of the guys that is still very much in play. He's committed to Alabama. He took an official visit to Auburn. That's a guy that's a difference maker. You got Malik Alter, you got Jordan Crawford. There's some guys there, some physical guys. Pass rush is still a question mark, and Caleb Smith's a guy that can you get a guy like that to be a difference maker at that edge spot at the buck position? So, but obviously a KJ Lacey that could impact an Antonio Coleman and vice versa.
Yeah, see all your questions in the YouTube chat. We will get to them as soon as we wrap up these ones from the message board. Another one from Jaws. Doesn't seem like there's much traction at buck linebacker, at least more than one. Any thoughts? I think Auburn sits in a very good spot to get Jared Smith, the 5-star from Thompson. And I also think Auburn is very much still going to be in the race for Herbert Scroggins, who committed to Miami, especially with Jacoby Ward committed now, his teammate out of high school. So I think Auburn sits in a good spot for Jared Smith. I also don't think you have you can play it patient at buck. I mean, you just got Joe Phillips and Jamonte Waller. Keyron Crawford has a couple years of eligibility, especially if you can get a guy like Jared Smith. I mean, they love third Scroggins, so then you kind of push him to the end. And
Jared Smith is a different kind of guy than those guys. He's the longer body, big body guy, and you've got some different type of players that actually would work well. And so that's a guy I absolutely think that becomes more of a target for Auburn.
AU in the ATL, does not having to overspend for Juju Lewis allow us enough money to be able to pull a Lacey or Knight for this class and a portal quarterback as a stopgap? Look, I think it didn't matter if Auburn got Juju Lewis or if they get KJ Lacey or Deuce Knight. I still think they're going to get a portal quarterback no matter what. Now, you probably do end up saving yourself a little bit of NIL funds with getting KJ Lacey or Deuce Knight. But
go back to it. That's not what this is about. So it might work out that way, but it's not about whether or not you want to pay somebody. I don't think that's the situation here at all. And so, but yeah, it could impact it. But if here's one thing we know: if they feel like they need a portal quarterback, even if you've spent money on a quarterback, then you've got to go get a portal quarterback, and that's not going to impact it. So if you feel like, hey, we don't have that guy, then you got to go get that guy, and I think that's what they would do.
Yes. Let's see. Hit on these questions here from the YouTube chat now. So we'll get to those already at 25 minutes, but
let's address, because there's a kind of a conversation going on now.
Okay.
So you forgetting about Walker White? No, I mean, they believe in Walker White. He's a guy, but you absolutely better go get a quarterback every year. That's been part of the issues for the past decade. It's been quarterback, it's been offensive line. You better go get one every year, and you better go try to get one that's better than the guy you got on campus. That's how you recruit. That's how you recruit at a high level. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to go get guys and create competition and may the best man win. That's how you build. You can't just go, we're going to recruit a guy and hand it to him. No, that's how you get in situations like Auburn's been in for the past 4 or 5 years.
Yes. Let's go through these questions now. I'm more concerned with O-line and quarterback. I hope you're not talking about recruiting, because offensive line recruiting for Auburn has been pretty fantastic this year under Jake Thornton. Have 5 commitments, and you're in a spot where you're still competing for Andrew Babalola and Malachi Goodman, and you have some other names kind of quietly on the board as well. So maybe he's talking about the roster.
I honestly, but I think Auburn's offensive line roster right now is as good as it's been since 2017. It's as good as it's been since 2017. That 2017 team had some offensive line pieces, did a good job, and had Kerryon Johnson not got hurt. That team probably is a playoff team. This is the best collection of offensive linemen, and it may not be as good the first 5, but this offensive line group has 10, 12 guys, I believe, that are capable of going out playing. That ain't even close to that for the past, I don't know, decade almost in Auburn football. So I think it's in much better shape.
There were several questions about Usman Chroma, and then this is a good one from Ant that kind of sums it all up. Everyone talks about Usman Chroma, but I like Shakai Mills-Knight, and I also heard Auburn likes him. What do you guys think? I think that's a situation where Auburn likes both of those guys quite a bit. I think Auburn's in the top 2, top 3 or so for both of those guys, and whoever wants in first, you're in, and I think Auburn would be perfectly happy with either one of those.
Yeah, big back. I think bigger back, getting a more physical guy, and both of those guys would fit that mold. I think that would be ideal and be something that Auburn was looking for. And so, yeah, you're right. One of those 2 guys says, "Hey, I'm in." I think they would. I think Derek Nix and Hugh Freeze would be turning cartwheels and say, "Let's go."
Question from Scott: is there a chance that anyone besides Peyton Thorne starts game 1? Chance? Yes, absolutely. Do I think someone else will start? No.
Yeah, I mean, I would say very slim chance. Peyton Thorne's healthy. I would say it's 99% chance that guy's starting game 1. I mean, I think it's that much of a separation. It felt like it was in the spring. We'll see what happens when they come back in preseason camp, but there's a small window to go out and try to overtake somebody, and that's what it would feel like in those couple of weeks that you have before you start to really gear back and start to prepare for a season.
Another one from Scott here: will this be a top 5 class or close to, like Free said? I think it'll be close. I think it'll be somewhere in that 5 to 8-ish range, maybe closer to 10, depending on how things go. But like we said earlier, you're going to sign a lot of guys, and there's still some really high-end guys that you could add to the class in terms of points, like Anquan Fagans and Blake Woodby and Jared Smith. And if you can get a guy like a Babalola, and either way, if you get Lacey, Deuce Knight, or something changes and you happen to get Juju Lewis, that's a lot of points at quarterback as well. So, and I mean, we just talked about running backs, so I think they'll end up close to top 5. I think it'll be a class that Auburn fans would be happy with.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's where you need to be. I think to get into a top 5 would probably take a flip of a name offered. It would take one of those top 10-ish type players to flip to get into that range, along with some of those other guys to kind of push you into that group. But the key is to continue to put yourself in that range of, stacking class after class after class. That's the key to continue to create competition and to build depth and try to keep those guys on campus.
Jason, you mentioned the D-line question, but I want to talk about it just a little bit more. Anyone that Auburn is going after that can change the dynamic about the D-line. Look, I mean, you have two of your top dogs committed already. You have Malik Autry, who's ranked as a 5-star by 24/7 Sports, and you have Jordan Crawford, who's ranked as a top 100 player by 24/7 Sports. Those guys, I think Jordan Crawford is a day one instant impact type guy on the defensive line. I think Malik Autry, as he continues to develop, will have a role and can be impactful year one wherever he ends up. And then he has a sky high ceiling. So you've got two of your top dogs committed. Other guys that Auburn's after, you mentioned Antonio Coleman, still trying to recruit Nate Marshall, the Michigan commit. Walter Mathis is a name that I'm watching really closely. Auburn really, really likes him and the potential that he could bring. Xavion Hardy from the JUCO ranks is a guy who was ranked really highly out of high school, had to go to JUCO, visited in the spring, still being looked at. So there's plenty of names there, and it's only July as well, so we'll kind of see what happens there. One from Shaq. Do we have a wide receiver board? Is not having a quarterback affecting that? I'll answer the second question. Yes, somewhat. Not having a quarterback in the class does not make it necessarily easy to recruit the wide receivers, but neither does signing 4 elite guys in one class the year before, either with guys that want to come in and play. So in terms of the wide receiver board, obviously Caleb Cunningham, the 5-star, who told our Ole Miss site today that Alabama's his number 1 team and Auburn's his number 2 team right now. So Auburn's still fighting there. You have CJ Wiley, who committed to Florida State. You're still somewhat in the mix there. You have some other guys as well. Derek Smith, the Alabama commit. So there's certainly some wide receivers out there, and I think Auburn will be able to make a move a little bit more once they get a quarterback. Jason, I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's some of it. I think what you mentioned is some of it too. Young guys on campus and looking at potential for playing time. I always think some of it is hey, wait and see. You see the wide receivers on campus. It's a much better group. You know, I think wide receiver wise, if Auburn goes out and you put up some numbers and you throw the football and you become a dynamic passing team and 4 or 5 games in, then all of a sudden I think it changes a wide receiver board. You may add a couple of guys that aren't on the board right now that might go, man, I kind of liked Auburn, but I wasn't sure. Now they've shown me that we will get the football in an offense like that. So I think that probably has some impact on it too.
Yeah, that's a good point. JW, what if Auburn doesn't sign either of the backup, either of the other quarterbacks? What's the backup plan? I mean, at that point, you would go after a really high-end portal guy, most likely. But I would be very surprised if Auburn doesn't get a high school quarterback this class, and specifically the 3 that we've mentioned, and mainly KJ Lacey or Deuce Knight. Let's see. Trying to find some questions here. Question from Scott again. Could Walker White steal some snaps from Peyton Thorne? Not steal, but I think they would try to get Walker and all those guys snaps at every opportunity in terms of Alabama A&M, New Mexico, Louisiana Monroe, stuff like that. I think they'll try it. You got to try and get those young guys, Hank Brown included in that, and Holden Gerner.
Yeah.
You have to try and get them developed because Peyton Thorne's gone next year.
Yeah, I think for Walker to get to steal a few snaps, he's going to have to overtake one of those guys. And he may have done that already. We don't have a pecking order, but we feel pretty certain that Peyton Thorne's at the top. After that, nobody really separated themselves in the spring, I don't believe. Which one of those guys can separate themselves when they come back? That's, to me, is where the quarterback news becomes, is who can work themselves into the number 2 spot. I think, they're all physical. They are talented in different ways. But I think you feel like you probably got to slide to the 3rd spot to have a shot. And you're right. I do believe if you're Hugh Freeze and Ken Austin and those guys, that you want to get some of those guys in games and get them some snaps to just, if nothing else, to see how prepared they are, knowing that, Peyton Thorne's going to be gone after this season, or to get those guys prepared if they're needed this year. All those things are needed, and that's why early on trying to get them in as much as possible would be great.
Question from Steven here. You think Goodman, as in Malachi Goodman, I think he was trying to say, can Auburn get him, or is he going to Penn State, basically? I would give Penn State the nod right now, but that one is far from over. And I think Auburn is the pretty clear number 2 team right there, right behind Penn State, trying to steal him out of the Northeast. So that will be interesting to keep tracking. But I do think there's a little bit more of an emphasis, at least right now, on Andrew Babalola. Look, I mentioned it on our message board. on Monday, I believe it was. Babalola is a guy who could legitimately be in contention wherever he goes in school, and if he gets the right development, to be a number 1 pick in the NFL draft. That is how he's viewed as an offensive tackle. And so, look, Auburn's putting a lot of chips in that basket right now. Question from Mike. Any word on Perry Thompson and off-season workouts so far? Good one.
Yeah, honestly, I hadn't heard much about it because it's been a pretty quiet time in terms of on-campus stuff from a coaching perspective. And so, the players would be the ones that would tell it. Here's what we know about Perry Thompson. He's physical. He's talented. He's very explosive. He's going to be physically a guy that when you walk out there, you're going to go, because we saw Cam in the spring, it'll be a very similar situation. Physically, he's going to look like he's ready to go. The question is going to be, how does he handle the picking up the offense, the scheme, the system, catching the football, doing all those things that you have to do to then work your way into a playing rotation. But physically, he'll be ready to go. There's no question about that. It's just a matter of those other things.
Yeah, for him, I mean, especially not going through spring practice, it's probably find a couple niche spots or something, a couple things that he can do really well
early on and try to work your way in.
Yeah, and get him involved there. The thing with Cam, why he was able to step in so quickly in the spring, is Central Phoenix City runs a very advanced offense under Patrick Nix. So it was a pretty easy transition for him. And obviously, now going into fall camp with spring under his belt, that makes things quite a bit easier. Let's see. We will put 2 of these questions together. Felix, do you think this team will be able to win 9 games? And Drex, I think the floor is 7 games and ceiling is 9 games. I wouldn't disagree with that, Drex, to be honest.
I mean, I think this should be a better football team than it was last season, I believe. I think there's more pieces for this team. And that's a team that won 6, probably should have won 8. Obviously, the schedule is a little bit different. I think it's somewhere in there. I think the reasonable expectations would be 7-5 to 9-3, and if the offense were to come along and you start to move the football and score and do, then it can change things. Because I think that's what it takes defensively. Can you go out and create some turnovers and can you get off the field enough to separate and to get moving forward? You got to score points, and can this team do that? I think that's going to be the ultimate determining factor of that record at the end of the season.
Kind of talking about the team a little bit more here. Johnny, how do you feel about Jeremiah Caldwell fit into the offense this fall? I felt he was underutilized last season.
He's a player. We love Jeremiah Cobb. Again, a lot of the reason he was underutilized last year is because they couldn't get enough first downs. They couldn't run enough plays to get to the third running back. They used him in some passing situations, and I mean, you had Brian Battie and you had Damari Alston and you had Jarquez Hunter. It's hard to get that many guys involved when you're not, getting first downs and creating. That's it, and that was his situation. But I do think he's a guy that becomes more involved in year 2. His skill set is through the roof, especially as a receiver, and I still think that's where he can continue to be a big part of things.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, last year he didn't go through spring practice. He got in late, or not late, but he got in the summer. And so he basically had a package. He was kind of the receiving back who, at least early in the season when Robbie Ashford was still a part of the offense, he was in with Robbie a lot. And then a lot of the times when he was in later, it was running routes, doing stuff like that. So I think his package will be expanded. It won't be a package. He will be a part of the offense fully this year is what I would say. Question from Scott again. Is there a surprise guy that may commit that we don't know about? Good question. No one on our radar right now that we don't know about necessarily. A good example of that would be a guy like Bryce Diaz, who came in randomly for a camp in June with Blake Woodby, his teammate up there at St. Francis in Maryland. Jason, you talked to him before the camp, and he said, if I get offered, I'm going to commit.
He did.
He got offered. He committed. He was very excited to commit. And so that would be kind of a surprise guy that materialized very quickly. Word is starting to get out there more. Our guy Tom Loy had more on it. If there's a surprise guy that may catch Auburn fans off guard over the next 6 weeks or so, maybe it'd be Jared Smith, because he does want to commit before his senior season starts. So I think that's one that may surprise fans a little bit more. But we've touched on that a lot over at auburnundercover.com. So if you're a VIP member over there, it would not be a surprise to you.
Yeah, I don't know if there's an off the radar guy where you go, man, that guy's just came out of nowhere.
Not before a senior season starting.
Yeah, no, maybe you start to look at it, and maybe you go Logan Anderson, because somebody talked about linebacker. Maybe a Logan Anderson is a guy that may feel like it's kind of off the radar a little bit, but the Fife, do everything offensive player. That's also, he's going to be a linebacker on the next level. Was freakishly athletic at Auburn's camp. Maybe a guy like that says, "Hey, I'm in. I'm ready to go." But I mean, obviously Alabama and Georgia, all of them, I don't know that he's in a rush to do things, but somebody like that could kind of come off the radar a little bit if they were to come back for Big Cat. But I don't think there's anybody that's just like Diaz was.
Yeah, no, exactly. Again, wait until the senior season starts. There will, I will just about guarantee it, there will be a name that we don't have on our big board, someone that we're not talking about right now that ends up in Auburn's class. There's always one of them. And that happens for every school across the country. It's why teams didn't want to have a summer signing period. They want to see senior tape. They want to find these guys. Jason, we will hit this question very quick from Brett. Chroma or Mills Knight, who do you guys like better? I like both of them a lot. If I had to pick one, I'd go Chroma, but it's really close.
Yeah, and a lot of that's because we saw him in camp. That tends to sway things when you see a guy in person and you see him, his ability to catch the football and do some of those things, and body control was really elite. And so it's just probably more that we've seen him a little bit more. So I think either one of those guys, if you're able to get one of those two guys, you feel good.
Yeah, look, both fantastic players, both fantastic kids for that matter. They're really fun to talk to, really fun to interview. So Auburn would be very good with either one of them that they get. We just touched on linebackers. Yeah, we'll touch on this question from Kevin. With Auburn backing off and shifting gears potentially on Juju Lewis, does Auburn get a little desperate and overvalue other quarterback recruits? Personally, I would say I don't think so.
I think what we have learned, because I think if that was going to happen, then Auburn would have overpaid in the transfer market and had maybe been a little bit more. I don't think that was the situation. So I don't feel like that's something that Hugh Freeze is going to do. Now, again, I think it probably comes back to the situation of if you don't get what you're looking for, if you're not able to do those things, then it probably leads you more towards the portal side of things moving forward. But again, a lot of that depends on this season. Who knows? Hank Brown or Holden Gardner or Walker White, one of those guys may be forced into action, if something were to happen to Peyton Thorne or whatever, and they may light it up, and you may go, boy, we feel good. We're great at quarterback now. We're good. You never know what the situation holds.
Let's see. One from Anthony here. Do you think Camden Brown turns the corner this year? Really want to see him shine.
Can he stay healthy? We love Cam. He's one of our guys. That's been the bugaboo for him. He had a really good start to the spring and then got banged up again, and it limited him some. But the issue at wide receiver is that you've loaded up that room with some older guys.
I was literally going to pair that with another question. Scott was asking, could Cam Coleman be a 1,000-yard receiver? I don't know if Auburn can have a 1,000-yard receiver because there's a lot of dudes that are going to catch passes.
That's it. I think. I mean, you think about to have a 1,000-yard receiver, you probably need to have 3,500 yards passing. I think Auburn's still going to run the football. You would have to be to me, that would be ultra dynamic offense. That would be, I don't know, to remember the last time Auburn had an offense. I mean, the Jarrett Stidham years, that 2017, they had a really good offense. It would probably take 3,500 yards because Rivaldo Fairweather's going to get his touches. Obviously, Andre Lambert Smith and Robert Lewis, and I think Sam Jackson's a guy. There's going to be a lot of options there, but Cam Coleman is a guy that's going to have an impact. There's no question. I don't know that we'll see 1,000 yards, but I think he's a guy that becomes. He may lead the league in lead the team in touchdowns. I can see that happening. I just don't know that it'll be a 1,000-yard receiver.
Paul asked about Juju and Hardy asked about KJ. Guys, we touched, for those that came in late, we touched on that pretty much to begin the show. I think around the 5-minute mark or so after we talked about the recent commits. So y'all can go back and watch that. We did already touch on that. How is Alex McPherson concerned with health issues? Hugh Freeze talked about that at Ambush last week. He said that he thinks that he'll be ready to go during the season. Luckily, if you're Auburn, you have probably the best backup kicker in the country in Towns Magoo. So if Alex is not ready to go, you feel pretty good about what you've got at kicker.
I think it's how much can Alex now recover, gain some of his weight back. He said, he's labeled it as gastrointestinal issues. So it caused him to lose some weight. And Alex is not a guy that had a ton of weight to lose. And so thankfully I think they figured it out, kind of started to kind of get some of that strength back. And the good news is you think about it going, look, it's really 1st of September. He doesn't necessarily have to be ready to go when you start practice the 1st of August. Can you get him back and build that strength up and get ready to go? And so hopefully that'll be the case.
A lot of ground beef and rice in the diet for the next month or two over there.
Yes.
Felix, do you think Juju is coming to Auburn in the 2025 class? I would say no. I do not think he would be Auburn's quarterback in the class.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, a month ago, we probably both would have leaned that way.
Even Sunday, when I wrote my mock class, I felt like he was still the most likely option.
Yeah, and I think, and again, you can go back and watch, but I think it's not just, hey, we don't have enough money, whatever. I think it's Auburn going, hey, there's some other guys we like, and let's look at those guys a little harder again.
We're going to touch on 3 questions to end the show here. Already at 45 minutes, but these are 3 good ones to finish on. 2 more from Scott, who has been firing off some great questions tonight and having some great discourse. Are there any stadium upgrades coming in the near future? Well, John Cohen talked about the north end zone and what's coming when we were at Ambush last week, Jason.
I believe that they're coming. I don't know what near future would look like. Obviously, we know scoreboard is the first step of that. But there's no question that that's part of a bigger plan. What that plan is still being worked on, because the issue is how do you go about stadium expansions in this day and age? Because it's not like it was in 2000 where let's just pack a bunch of seats in there. Now it's premium seating, and John Cohen mentioned it. So look, there's still a waiting list for premium seating. That's where the upgrades are going to come. And actually it may be a case where you may actually go from 87,000 or 88 or whatever to 80,000. You may lose seats to add premium seating areas, which in turn adds more revenue for a program. But I think that they are absolutely working towards a plan. And people have asked us, hey, they're going to be a master plan announced. When they get ready to say, hey, here's what we're doing next, I think they won't have any issues saying that. Right now, I think they're still trying to figure out how to incorporate it and what they need to do to give a revenue stream that's going to be needed for the changing in college athletics.
Question here from Curtis. Is Auburn still recruiting running back DeJuan Morris? Yes, they are absolutely still recruiting him. Much different guy than Usman Chroma and Shakai Mills-Knight. Smaller a little bit, very, very dynamic. I mean, he splits out wide a good bit. He's polished as a pass catcher already. Obviously, the USC commit who officially visited in June. I think Auburn would maybe prefer a little bit to get one of those bigger guys. But if DeJuan Morris called them, if he called them right now and said, hey, I'm ready, I want to flip from USC, I do not think Auburn would say no. So, yes, they're still recruiting him. And then we will close out the show with this question from Scott. Jason, is there a recruit or commit to keep an eye on that we might lose? To answer that question, I will go down the commit list, and we will say whether or not Auburn fans should be concerned or if there's other teams still involved. Malik Autry, yes. Ohio State, Florida still involved. Got to still keep watching that one. JJ Falk, Florida still involved. I'd be stunned if he went somewhere else.
Yeah.
Eric Winters, I don't think teams will go away, but I think Auburn is in a good spot there. Jordan Crawford went to go see LSU. I'd be surprised if he ended up somewhere else. Devin Williams is one, probably watching a little closely after going to officially visit Texas in June. Need to kind of catch up with him soon and kind of see where his head's at and have a story on that soon. But that would be one watching a little bit more closely. Tavares Dice, Florida's still recruiting him, but I really struggled to see Florida flipping guys from schools until what happens this fall and if they can prove that the staff can stick around. Donovan Starr, just because he committed out of the blue, I think a team could make a run at him this fall maybe, but right now, no. Alvin Henderson, no. Broderick Scholl, I would say no. Ryan G. shut down his recruitment. Bryce Diaz, probably not. Hollis Davidson, no. You're not going to lose him again. Dante Core also shut down his recruitment. Spencer Dolan, no for right now. Ty Buster, other teams recruiting him a little bit, but I think Auburn likes him more than other teams, and they've done that to him. And Jacoby Ward, I would also say no. So to sum it up, the names that watching a little bit more closely: Malik Autry, Devin Williams, and maybe a guy like Donovan Starr, just because when those commitments kind of come out of the blue, you have to watch them maybe a little closer. Like a guy like Tyler Lockhart, he came out of the blue and he ends up decommitting. I'm not saying that Donovan Starr is going to decommit or he's going to go somewhere. I'm just saying a team could make a run at him in the fall maybe and maybe pick up traction or something like that.
Yeah, the other part of it is too is this process is now so early. It happens so fast that guys go, I need to go ahead and commit. And then you go, well, let me go take a look around, and things change. You look, coaches move, all these things. And so it creates more upheaval and more movement than we've ever seen before. And so if you said today, will all those guys be on Auburn's commitment list at the end of the year? I'd say very, very doubtful. Who it's going to be, who knows? But I'd be shocked if all these guys are still on Auburn's commitment list when signing day comes. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's the thing. You've already had your first wave of attrition, so to speak, with Carday Smith and Tyler Lockhart. You'll probably have another wave of another guy or two before December hits.
And you added Alvin Henderson off somebody else's commitment list. There'll probably be another couple of those guys too. So you lose guys, but you're also adding guys that are committed elsewhere too. That's just the way it is.
Yep, that's the way things go. So we're going to wrap it up there at the 51-minute mark. Really appreciate everyone that was on here tonight. If you're still here, there's like 300 plus people still here at 9:20 p.m. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube down below. That's totally free and doesn't cost you anything. And I will plug again real quick that you can join us at auburnundercover.com at $1 for your first month. Take a little test drive, or you can get 50% off an annual sub, which would get you through official visit season next summer and get you kind of right before Big Cat, right to this point next year. So you can take advantage of that sale right now. One of our better deals during the year, a couple different options there. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Jason, any kind of final thoughts? I mean, we've touched on just about everything at this point.
Yeah, no, just kind of looking forward to, kind of getting this thing rolling again. You get to the kind of the doldrums, even though Auburn had a couple of commitments and had things going on, it still feels like this is the kind of really the only slow time, even though there's still things going on. You kick up next week with SEC Media Days, obviously heading towards Big Cat. And so, looking forward to kind of getting this thing rolling as it kind of gears up towards the season now, and you start to get guys on campus for visits, all those things. Then you start to get a real feel for maybe what guys are feeling, what they're doing. That always has an impact.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And look, it's a dead period. This is maybe the quietest week during the year, but we still had, I think, 5 news stories today on the website. We always have a bunch of new stuff every single day. Have stuff planned for tomorrow, so make sure to come check us out over there. Appreciate everyone on here. Probably catch you guys again next week, sometime around media days. We will not be in Dallas, but that does not mean we will not have coverage. Coverage will not look any different from home, and that also means we'll be able to hop on here on YouTube and do podcasts and live reactions and stuff like that during the day. So we'll catch you guys again probably sometime next week. And then Friday, I know Fridays with Philip will be back this week as well. So y'all can catch that on Friday. Catch you guys again soon.